Hello and welcome to the Classical Guitar LPs podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Powell. For this episode, we'll be listening to an Everest recording 3155 entitled 400 Years of the Classical Guitar. The guitarist is Alrio Diaz. I'll look forward to visiting with you about this recording for a couple of reasons, not to mention the beautiful and gorgeous playing of Alrio, but also what's going on with regard to that this entire recording was released some years prior on a completely different record label, but the interesting thing is that they used the same cover picture, and it's not of the guitarist. So that'll be fun to talk about. We'll be right back. And we're back on the Classical Guitar LPs podcast. As a young guitar player, and still to this day, I tend to really scrutinize the editions, the people who edited and were involved in the printing process of the music that I'm trying to learn. And I'm not sure what that's all about. Sometimes I wonder if I wouldn't worry about that so much, maybe I'd get more practicing done. But in any case, it's one of those things that you sort of always like, well, who did this fingering, or who did this editing process, or what did that person actually do between the composer and these printed notes that I'm interpreting and learning? And Alrio Diaz is one of those people. His name is on plenty of the musical scores that I have learned over the last 30 years, and it's one of those things where it's like I'd really like to hear this person's playing, and so now I'm very excited to be able to do that. What's very curious from the get-go, and it took me a while to look at it. Some of it was because I was looking at this in sort of not the most clear light. But anyway, you look at this record jacket, and it's a nice green background, a nice handsome young man's on there playing. It says 400 years of the classical guitar. Here we go. One presumes that this is the guitar player that you're looking at. I looked at this one time in kind of a more clearer light, and I said, my goodness, those tuning pegs are sticking out like a folk guitar from the 60s or the late 50s even. So you look at that, you see those tuning pegs going out the wrong way, and you're like, that guy's hand's looking weird. And what really caught it was that the guitar player did not have any sort of nails at all. You could really see it plainly on the picking hand or right hand thumb of the guitarist on this record jacket. And I'm like, how is he getting the tone that he's getting on Recuerdos de Alhambra with no thumbnail? And then it dawned on me, this is not Alrio Diaz. This is not a picture of Alrio Diaz. What the heck's going on? So I start looking, and sure enough, this is an Everest recording. It says 1966. Okay, that's when they probably released it. Then you look back. This was released originally on a label made here in the U.S. called Hi-Fi Records in 1959. Here's the funny thing. Exact same cover art on it. Same guy. Same guitar. Same no thumbnail. And it's an album entitled The Guitar of Venezuela by Alrio Diaz. And so, in any case, I don't know what's going on there. I don't know the ins and outs of that. I think what I'll do is I'll leave that as a sort of a curious footnote, because if you look at pictures of Alrio Diaz, who actually had a very, very long life, I learned that he died only a few years ago. This January of the recording of this podcast, rather, is made in January of 2023, and he only died in 2016, so it's not been very long since he passed away, but this recording was made so long ago. And I guess the point of that is, why on earth is it not a photo of the actual artist? I don't understand it. There's a couple records that I've done where it's that way, and that's just sort of a thing I'll have to keep digging and kind of figure out, and maybe I'll get to piece that back on some of the other episodes. The playing is definitely Alrio Diaz, and I just really like the gentleman's tone. He's got a nice sound, a very good warmth. You can tell this is a seasoned performer who's playing. And so let's talk about Alrio Diaz, the player, here a little bit. Born in 1928 in Venezuela, and at a very young age, his uncle teaches him the guitar, and he just sort of takes off on it, and if we fast forward into his youth, he is granted a scholarship to go study in Spain in 1950, and he studies with Regino Sanz de la Maza, who is a huge name. If you know that name at all, it's probably because that is who the Concierto de Aran was actually dedicated to. It was not Segovia, surprise, surprise. It was to that person, Regino Sanz de la Maza. Now, Alrio Diaz, you might know because he was in the Segovia camp as well. He studies with Segovia and Siena later, and I think probably you would associate that name with the Segovia camp. But regardless, a great performer. So here we are on the side one. We have Recuerdos de Alhambra. I love his tremolo. I'm always a sucker for a good tremolo, and we certainly have that. It's a fast one. He's going fast, and I double-checked the tuning of the record with my variable speed. A lot of the recordings I have to slow down, and I think that's because I have some hot power to my house. But in any case, yes, this is at A440, and he's flying along, so that's good. We have two, no surprise here that we have two waltzes by Loro. The connection there, for those of you who don't know, Alrio Diaz is a Venezuelan guitarist, Antonio Loro, a Venezuelan composer and also guitarist. So there you go. Then we have some pieces that I've not heard before by a composer with the last name of Soho. We have three pieces, Guasa, Cancion, and Cuerpo. They're nice. They're nice pieces of music that'll be fun for me to do some exploring to see more about. It's a nice idiom and sounds very, very lovely. Then we have the classic Asturias or Leyenda by Albéniz. I should point out on this record that it's Asturias and then in parentheses Lavenda by Albéniz. So obviously a misprint on the Everest record label. And we close out side one with two popular Catalonian songs by Anónimo, and so you'll hear them both as El Noi de la Mare and Canco de Lladre. Enjoy. This is a great first side. You're listening to the Classical Guitar LPs podcast. And we're back on the Classical Guitar LPs podcast. I hope you enjoyed side one. I know for me personally, that was a lot of fun to hear that artist, Alrio Diaz, play. I know that there are several tracks on this record that this is the first time I've ever heard any of these pieces, namely the middle pieces on side one. And, you know, I suppose I could have done some digging and listened to some other artists play these pieces, but maybe there's a reason I've not heard these before. Maybe there's a reason. And I think these recordings are really great. It's great to hear his artistry playing those on side one. So when I began playing guitar in the early 1990s, you either bought cassettes or CDs. That was kind of the thing in those days. Records, of course, were still available. No one in my home played, and so I didn't already have those things at my disposal. And sort of everywhere I went, I happened to be sort of a bushwhacker or a trailblazer. There were some recordings at my undergrad school at Simpson, but not very many. And so I just bought a bunch of recordings. And in those days, in the 90s, a lot of these artists didn't get repressed over to CDs. It's just unfortunately sort of an unfortunate byproduct of the time that I'm coming to learn. There was no Spotify or YouTube or Apple Music or sort of endless streaming service that you could reference all of these different composers and pieces and different artists playing and giving their different interpretations. You had to sort of shop for these records and find them and hold on to them. Another artist that's featured in earlier season, if you look specifically at season 2, episode 5, I highlight a guitarist by the name of Oscar Helia, and that's another one that really is sort of in the same boat in terms of, you know, were his CDs repressed? You know, certainly they weren't popular, or I would have had them. Is kind of where I'm coming from. Yes, with the advent of YouTube and some of the other streaming services like Naxos, yes, you can find these things, and it's wonderful. That is a newfound invention. So those of you who are exploring or listening with Apple Music and all these things, please take advantage of that. Keep in mind, for people, you know, before music music was readily available on the internet, you had to either go to a music store that carried these things, or you had, if you were like me in a small town, over a half hour away from a city, you had to save up your money and sort of plan your time to go to the record store. And then if they had it or not, it was just sort of this big gamble, and it was a thing. And we had mail order clubs and all that kind of stuff, but that's maybe info for another episode. So we'll save that. We better get to talking about the music, or people are going to wonder what's going on with side 2. We carry on with the Sonata by Scarlatti. This is a great rendition of it. I really like Alrio's playing on this. And then we have two of the monsters of the violin repertoire transcribed for guitar. We've got the Gavotte by Bach and the Fuga by Bach. And so, of course, we hear Alrio Diaz's interpretations on that. He does a great job. I think he plays very, very well. I really like the pulse, the feel, the lines that you hear, especially in that fuga. It's just really, really quite well done. So good job indeed, Alrio Diaz from 1959. And then I will go ahead and say that I think his rendition of the Mozart variations by Fernando Sor are just great. I really love the pace in which he plays. There's a great spirit. You don't hear a lot of tenseness in his playing. It just comes off as really relaxed and fun, just as the opera, The Magic Flute, is. And so it's a great wrap up to a great second side. And I just want you to enjoy side 2 of this. Before we go and I let you hear the second side of this, I wanted to go ahead and share some feedback from one of the listeners. I went ahead and asked Frederick for his permission before I read this on the program, but just wanted to share it with the rest of you. Here is what one of the listeners had to say from Sweden. This is Frederick Eliasson. Frederick says, "Thank you for the great podcast. It's not too common to hear people analyzing classical guitar music and very few to discuss it with. I did just listen to your podcast, therefore I'm very happy to find it. I did just listen to the episode of Goran Solskjaer, much because he is the most famous classical guitar player in Sweden, and I am a Swede also. Though I'm not the biggest fan of Bach, your short review made me listen to him in a new way, and for sure it's a great LP. Thanks again, regards, Frederick," and a heart there. So thanks for listening out there in Sweden, Frederick, and hello from Iowa, and glad you're enjoying the program. Like many of you, I hope that you are listening from all over the place. I see the reports on my weekly things that come in, and please reach out. You can reach out and reach us at Instagram.com/Powell Guitar. That's sort of the main hub. And so I think I'll just go ahead and say that. There are some other ways to reach me. I do have a website. It's powellguitar.com, and there's Facebook as well. But really, Instagram is where I do that because I can have pictures of all the records and that sort of thing. And then wherever you listen to your podcast, you can see the new record jacket that comes up. You can see exactly what we're talking about. I did start making videos of some of the teasers for TikTok. That's another thing I'm kind of working on. One other quick announcement that I'll go ahead and say, I'm really excited about this. I have set a date for the end of February, and I'm going to be meeting with a very dear and old friend, and I can say colleague and fraternity brother, all these sorts of things, with a dear friend, Matt Oltman, who is a tenor. He is living in Mexico right now, and I'm really excited because I'll be able to go ahead and visit with him about some music that's very special to him on the next episode of the Classical Guitar LPs podcast. We're going to have a great time talking about that. I can't wait to share Matt's insight with you because the composer on this record is for half of the record is Benjamin Britten, who is one of the greatest composers ever, not just of guitar music, although he wrote a very, very important guitar piece, the Nocturnal, and we'll talk a bit about that. That Nocturnal is not on this record. This is going to be Julian Bream playing along with Peter Pears, and it's just going to be a great thing. I cannot wait to have Matt's insight for that. It's the first guest we've had on the Classical Guitar LPs podcast, and I'm really looking forward to this whole process. So the other thing is, too, with the way that I'm rolling out these episodes here, I'm not sure that the 6-episode season format is going to last too much longer. We're just going to kind of see how that works. I'm enjoying the growth, and I'm enjoying the listenership. So thank you. Enjoy side 2. Here we go. This is Alrio Diaz, 400 Years of the Classical Guitar on the Classical Guitar LPs podcast. Enjoy.